it's a bit of a moment in time, honestly. I feel like in 30 or so years, the energy sector and the way that we generate electricity, both in the UK and everywhere else, is going to look so different to now.
Welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. After 12 seasons of 40-Minute Mentor, we thought it was time to get back to some of our most popular previous 40-Minute Mentors on the podcast to see what has happened since they last came on the show. For this Where Are They Now episode, we're joined by a great friend of JBM, Tom Elvidge, co-founder of a UK-focused solar energy company, Synth. Last time Tom came on the podcast, we discussed his career journey from consulting to growing Uber from a windowless office to one of the most recognizable companies in the world. Today, we'll find out what he's been up to since and how he made the jump from operator to co-founder. So, Tom, a big, warm welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor. How are you doing?
Thanks very much, James. Doing very well. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we are recording this at the start of the new year. I know there's lots of exciting things going on at Synth, so I can't wait to dig into that. But before we tell our audience a bit more about what you've been building, you last came on the podcast, I think in 2021, and so much has happened since then. So do you mind just giving us a little bit of a whistle-stop tour around what you've been up to over the last 3 years? And I guess ultimately why you decided to make the transition from operator to founder?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, James. So yeah, it feels like a long time ago now in 2021, but I was at the time working at Arrival, an electric vehicle startup business based in the UK. Amazing company with huge ambitions, lots of great, talented folk, designing and building and manufacturing electric commercial vehicles, so buses, vans. And I was with them for several years, stepped away at the end of 2022. And I knew at the time that I wanted to do something a little different. I wasn't sort of looking to jump back into another exec role in a scale-up business, having been at Uber, WeWork, and Arrival over the past, I guess, nearly 10 years. And I wasn't entirely sure what the next step would be, honestly. So I wanted to just give myself a bit of an opportunity to step back. And I did some advisory work over 2023. I was working with early stage businesses, supporting founders in non-exec and advisory roles, which I loved. I thought it was great. I'd love to go back to that at some point in the future as well. But really, I was doing that to just provide the space to explore opportunities to found a business, something that I've always really wanted to do, and ended up doing about a year ago now. In fact, we founded Synth at the end of January last year. So it's coming up to 1 year now.
Oh, exciting times. And look, we've known each other for a long time. I'm super excited for you. I have no doubt you're going to be very successful. But let's not tease our audience anymore. Let's dive into all things Synth. So tell us a bit more about it. Where did the idea come from? And what, over the past 12 months, what have been some of the biggest milestones you've sort of hit?
Yeah, sure. So I've joined forces with an old friend and colleague from Uber. Max and I started working together 10 years ago now. In fact, over 10 years ago, right at the beginning of our journey at Uber. He joined the business about a year or so before me. So it was very small in the UK, and he was general manager for Manchester. And I then joined as general manager for Leeds. And together we, along with the leadership team in the UK, we expanded Uber across from one city out to 40 or 50 cities, and from, hundreds of drivers to over 100,000 drivers. So we both had this phenomenal privilege and experience of growing Uber in the UK, and learned an awful lot through this very intense environment and just, very full on sort of scaling of a consumer tech and operational business. We got talking again in 2023 about doing something together. And in fact, initially we were interested in the idea of acquiring a small business from, say, a retiring founder and somebody who'd built a company that would be looking to exit and hand over the reins to somebody else. So we explored that for 6 months or maybe more. And in fact, it was through that channel that we started looking at the world of solar. We explored solar installation businesses. We spoke to a number, got quite far along an acquisition journey with one based in Manchester who'd been going for about 5 years or so. And ultimately, at the end of 2023, we decided that we weren't going to acquire that business for a number of reasons, but we'd spent such a long time diving into the market and learning everything that we could about solar, including installing on our own homes, that we thought, why not? We can now take the plunge and we can found a business in this space. We felt that there was a good combination of it fitting our experience and our skills. It's a very operational business with a healthy kind of dose of tech enablement opportunity, which is where we both come from with companies like Uber, and also just something that we're really passionate about. So we sort of went right back to square one and to dive into a brand new industry, learn everything, which is what we've been doing over the last year, and just educate ourselves. So in a nutshell, Synth is a solar design, installation and monitoring business for both residential and commercial properties.
That's so awesome. I've seen the journey a bit from the sidelines, and I know you're having amazing traction, but it's not all positive. I know there's lots of challenges along the way when you're starting a venture like this at these early stages, particularly in an industry that you're relatively new to. So what have you found the most difficult parts of building Synth so far?
It's a great question. For the stage that both Max and I are at, we've worked in early stage businesses. But really, I think for myself, certainly over the past few years, I've held more leadership type positions. I've been managing other managers and working on sort of direction setting for companies. So to really go back to the very early days of hand-to-hand combat for every customer you're acquiring, just building everything from scratch is a real challenge, an eye-opener. I very much went into it knowing this is going to be the task. So you sort of prepare yourself for it. You got to tell yourself this is the bit that's hard. But that certainly has been one element of it, as well as just, as I say, getting into a brand new industry and just having to immerse yourself in all aspects of that. So we've really tried to take a very sleeves rolled up approach to that. So we've been right in the detail of every aspect of the business from the beginning, as you would expect, really. But whilst we've used partners that have performed the installations for us, electricians, roofers, and teams that we have partnered with who have got the skills and experience to actually install solar panels on properties. We've also been on site for every one of those installations that we've done as well, and we've spent more time on roofs and on scaffolding than at any other point in my life, certainly. Yeah, and just learning all the nuts and bolts right from the ground up.
It's the only way to do it, isn't it? Although I can imagine some fairly terrifying being up all those ladders if you're not used to it.
Yeah, we've conquered our vertigo along the way.
That's good to hear. And I guess for you personally, what have you found most difficult making that transition from, a very experienced, like highly regarded operator that's run businesses and been a GM and been a COO, like just really seasoned in that, to being a founder in it? That is a shift. So what have you found most hard about that transition, and what advice do you have for any other operators listening to this that are maybe thinking about starting their own venture?
I guess the sort of challenges are you just don't know what's around the corner. It's very difficult to predict. You're stepping into an incredibly unpredictable environment where anything that can go wrong probably will at some point, and you don't have the benefits of delegation to support you on that initial stages. We've now hired 2 awesome colleagues at the end of last year. So the team is growing, and already you can feel the difference that makes. But in the early days, it's just Max and I, and we're trying to figure everything out. And you're operating in a competitive environment. You're persuading people to part with really serious sums of money. So you're building trust as best you can from the very early stages in using everything that you can. So I think what feels very different in comparison to the other businesses I've worked in is you don't have the strength of a big brand behind you. Even Uber in the UK, whilst it was small and drivers and consumers hadn't heard of the business really when I joined, people didn't have to dig too deep to see that it was an established business in the US, even at that stage. So when you're absent that, it's a very different ball game. I think that's been challenging. And then I think, as I say, the other aspect to it is you just have to accept that you're sort of taking on a completely new role. In my case, at least, it was a very deliberate move to sort of step away from the privilege and the great sort of ancillary benefits that come with those type of roles, you're relinquishing, not least the salary. This is one, for example, but everything else too. You're surrounded by amazing colleagues. You've got the benefits of a founder who's already gone through that journey. So I think that you're just making a very deliberate choice, which was something that I'd always wanted to do. And, the timing felt right.
And not to be done lightly, right? But I know you spend a lot of time thinking it through, and obviously the advisory work you did, I guess you're probably getting exposure to different types of founders and just broadening out your experience even more. So I do think you can't not just go all in once you've got the conviction that it's the right thing to do, and just going in with your eyes open. And I think that's, I guess, a big part of this podcast is trying to tell the realistic version of that story. But I know for sure that although you don't have the big brand behind you, you and Max, two of the best operators I've ever worked with. And I think that holds a lot of sway. And it's great to hear that you've hired a couple of people into the team, because I think to learn from you and work closely with you in such an exciting space with such opportunity, I think they've chosen very well. So you'll be too modest to say anything else, but I'll big you up in that respect.
Well, that's very kind of you.
I guess it's a nice segue to hear a bit more about your aspirations for Synth. Where do you want the business to be in 5-10 years? What is the potential?
I mean, I think as we look at where things are today in the UK for solar, and part of our conviction for starting a business in this space was that we felt the experience of getting solar panels for our own homes was more clunky and challenging than it should have been, certainly could be, honestly. And I think there's opportunity to really improve the experience for the customer, both for homeowners and residential properties, but also for commercial solar installs as well. So we want to just enable that process so that it can be as painless and enjoyable as it could be and should be, in our view. I guess simply put, it is such a phenomenal technology that has been around for a while. Solar is not new as a technology. However, the developments in recent years have been astonishing. But it is an incredible thing that you can attach something to your roof that will generate electricity and power your home. That in itself is sort of magical. And the experience of upgrading your home to do that and generate clean, free energy should be a delight. It should be something that is a sort of magical experience for consumers. And that's what we want to build. And that's the experience that we want to give people, so they come out of it just feeling that everything was so pain-free. It's a challenge, there's a lot to do to put that in place, but that's the vision of where we want to get to. And I think coupled with that, part of the conviction, of course, as well, is we see this as an area that has just an enormous role to play in the future of the UK's energy production. We're only at the beginning of what will be, we think, a real transformation in solar across the country. We're now at somewhere like 4% of homes have solar in the UK. Put that into context, Germany is now at over 40%. So
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there is a real opportunity, and the energy and the sunlight that the UK receives and the hours of daylight make it very, very feasible. In fact, it's similar to Germany in that regard. And the falling price of solar equipment over the last even 5 years, in fact, even more recently than 5 years, the costs have just really plummeted for solar panels, batteries, inverters. And it's making the economics of this better than they've ever been in the past. So with those things, and then the final one I would add is with the change of government last year, there's just such a prevailing kind of tailwind. And it seems like there is a real commitment and desire to sort of pursue this area from the government. So, a lot there gives us confidence that we can build something. And in terms of where do we want to go, I suppose, coming back to your original question, our aspiration is honestly to just deliver the very best experience that we can to customers and sort of go from there, I suppose. We're not minded to, I guess, raise the sort of lofty aspirations, and, we're ambitious, but we're not at this point seeing it as a 5-year journey that we want to sort of get to a stated goal. We simply want to build the foundations now at this early stage and then just keep building. And I think this is a space that an industry and a market that will keep evolving. We want to stay on top of that. We want to be regarded as the best provider that is out there. We want to be seen and recognized for excellence in our operations, and we want to be seen as the best tech company in this space as well. We want to build out all of the technology that we can that helps customers maximize the benefit that they get from solar. So that's kind of enough for us today.
Awesome. Very exciting to hear. And I would imagine for lots of people listening to this, the sort of exciting early stage mission driven business that they might want to get involved with. I'd imagine you'll get a lot of interest off the back of this. So you've just made your first couple of hires. For anyone that's listening to this that would be interested in coming on this journey with you now or in the future, what advice do you give to them about kind of what you look for in talent, and any other tips, or just maybe to whet their appetite around potential roles in the future? Anything else you can share with our audience? I'm sure they'll be very grateful.
Well, we've hired 2 roles, as I said. So we've hired a developer, founding developer, to really at this early stage own everything tech related. We've built a number of tech products that are really novel already, honestly, in this industry. So we've built a tool, we call it the Sun Mapper, which you can input any address in the UK and it will immediately return the generation potential for the property, how many panels can be fit on each of the roofs of the property. And then you can toggle the roofs on and off, and it will build up a proposed installation cost, the payback period, and the generation potential. So it's a real one of its kind. And we see a lot of potential for further tools like that. We're also building monitoring tools that can, for example, inform customers of the best tariff that they can be on. So one of the best ways and the most important things to do is to make sure that customers are on the right tariff, whether it's Octopus, British Gas, E.ON, etc. So we can take real data from our customers, generation, battery usage, consumption, and we can plug that into the existing tariffs that there are on the market and inform customers as to which one would be the best for their real usage over the past, say, 6 months. So that's the developer. And then we've also hired an operations manager who is owning all things sort of customer journey, right from initial design through to the completed installation. And we see further roles in both of those two broad areas for the business. In terms of what we look for, I think smart, great people who are willing to roll the sleeves up and get stuck in. You know, at this stage, there's just every aspect of the company is sort of up for grabs. You know, everything is to be built. Every process that we're designing and implementing is imperfect and will last a few months at most before it's refreshed and rebuilt. And that's the way we want it to be. So yeah, we want people who are sort of energized by that opportunity and keen to just make a difference in all areas of the company.
Sounds super exciting for anyone getting involved. And yeah, I have no doubt you'll hire some exceptional talent as you look to execute on these big ambitious goals. Well, sadly we're at an end, Tom, but we've got one final question. I just wanted to look, I guess, more broadly. What do you think the climate sector will look like over the years ahead? And why would you urge our listeners to get involved in the sector now? Because we definitely see this broader sense of the best talent we're working with wanting to work in purpose-driven environments, particularly when it comes to tackling the climate crisis. And you've launched a venture in this space. So yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that and why now is a great time to get involved.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, James. I guess the first sort of honest thing to say is it's very rewarding to work in an area where it's difficult to think of too many things that are negatives around implementing solar and installing solar for properties. There's just so much benefit to be gained. And that's a great space to be in. It's an enormous challenge. Of course, we all know this, that the future of where, I think not only is the challenge very great, you know, I don't need to kind of recount that. The way that I would best describe it as well is it's a bit of a moment in time, honestly. I feel like in 30 or so years, the energy sector and the way that we generate electricity both in the UK and everywhere else is going to look so different to now. So it's exciting to have a small part to play in that and to be part of this kind of big change. I think one of the things that's always energized me throughout the roles that I've had is to feel like you're doing something that is making a big change. And that definitely felt the case, for example, at Uber. It was a real transformation in the way people were able to get around and you know, had a material impact for people on their sort of day-to-day lives. And I think the energy sector is going through an absolutely enormous change. So to be involved with that is great.
Love it. Yeah. And it's I don't know, I feel like history It's hopefully repeating itself a little bit. I remember when you first came on the podcast and you talked about starting Uber in the UK, sort of being, I think, a windowless office in Leeds, kind of really scrappy. No one really knew the brand here, but then going on this kind of crazy growth to the brand that we all use today, to now starting again something, but again in its infancy, but with real traction behind it. It feels like lots of positive momentum. So I certainly, from all the JBM team, wish you nothing but success. I'm a massive fan of yours and Max, and love the sound of the business, and have no doubt you'll have a really great year ahead. So we wish you all the very best with it, and just wanted to say a massive thank you for coming back on the podcast to share what you've been up to in the last few years.
Amazing. Thanks very much, James. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Tom. Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40 Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40 Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.